Hey there, story lovers. We'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching this from? Drop a comment below and let us know. And if you enjoyed this heartwarming tale, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss out on tomorrow's special story. We've got even more exciting content coming your way, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. Join our growing community, share your thoughts, and be a part of our journey. See you tomorrow with another incredible story. Watch the jaw-dropping moment a dog brings a comatose man back to life. John, a once energetic 45-year-old man, had always been the life of every room. He was a man full of strength, vitality, and joy. But now he lay in a hospital bed, his body frail and lifeless, surrounded by the steady beeping of machines that kept him alive. For months he had been in a coma, unable to respond to the world around him. His family had clung to the hope that one day he would wake up, that the man they knew and loved would return. But as the days passed, that hope began to fade. The doctors had done everything they could. They were kind but honest, telling John's wife Sarah that there was no hope left. The machines were the only thing keeping John's body functioning, but his mind was gone. They said that tomorrow they would have to make a decision that no family should ever have to make, to let him go. Sarah sat by his side, her eyes swollen from days of crying, her hands clasped tightly around John's. She whispered to him, telling him she loved him, that she couldn't bear the thought of losing him. But deep down she knew it was coming. She had to let him go. But the thought of it was unbearable. As Sarah sat there, the door to the room opened, and a soft, familiar bark echoed through the room. Buddy, John's loyal Labrador, entered. Normally, Buddy would run in with his tail wagging, eager to see his owner. But today he walked slowly, his eyes filled with confusion and sadness. He approached the bed, stopped, and looked up at Sarah. There was something different about him. This wasn't the happy, playful dog Sarah knew. This was a dog who seemed to sense that something was terribly wrong. Buddy gently nudged John's hand with his nose, as if trying to wake him, but there was no response. Sarah's heart broke. She whispered softly to Buddy, "Say goodbye, Buddy. It's time." But Buddy didn't leave. He stayed by John's side, lying down on the floor next to the bed, his gaze never leaving John's face. It was as though Buddy was waiting for something, waiting for a sign. Buddy's presence in the room felt like a strange shift, a moment of change in the otherwise still and quiet space. He stood there, gazing up at John's unconscious face, his eyes filled with confusion. Buddy had always been a happy dog, bouncing around, eager to greet his owner with enthusiasm. But today there was something in the air that made him hesitant. It was as if he knew. He knew this was not the same as the usual visits. Sarah watched him closely, her heart heavy with the weight of the decision she knew she had to make. She had hoped for a miracle, for a sign that John would wake up, but each passing day seemed to steal away that hope. The doctors had been clear. There was no hope. And yet, here was Buddy, standing in front of them, a silent witness to this heartbreaking moment. "Say goodbye, Buddy," Sarah whispered, her voice barely a murmur, as if the words themselves could make it real. She had said those words many times in the last few days, convincing herself that she had to accept the inevitable. But as she looked at Buddy, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was different this time. There was something about the way he looked at John, the way he refused to leave his side, that made her question everything. Buddy nudged John's hand again, this time a little more insistently. His nose pressed gently against John's fingers, as if urging him to respond. But nothing happened. The machines kept their steady, rhythmic beeping, a constant reminder of the life that seemed so far out of reach. Sarah could feel the tension in the air, as though time itself had slowed. The world outside the hospital room continued, but here in this sterile room, everything stood still. Minutes passed and Sarah's thoughts began to race. The doctors were right, weren't they? They had said there was no hope. John's body was fading, slowly, inevitably. And yet here was Buddy, still by his side, still hoping. It was as if Buddy believed something Sarah could no longer bring herself to believe. There might still be a chance. But the longer Buddy stayed there, the more Sarah's doubt grew. What if he knew something they didn't? What if Buddy wasn't just here to say goodbye, but to bring John back? The thought was absurd, but in that moment it felt possible. Buddy was more than just a dog. He was family, and maybe, just maybe, he was the one who could save John when everyone else had given up. As Sarah sat there, lost in the swirl of emotions, something strange began to happen. The air in the room felt different, heavier somehow, and a shift was occurring that she couldn't quite explain. Buddy, who had been sitting quietly by John's side, suddenly stood up, his ears twitching. His gaze never left John's face, and his body stiffened with an almost unnatural intensity. Something was happening. Buddy took a few steps closer to John's bed, his tail now stiff and his posture more alert. Sarah held her breath, her heart pounding in her chest. Was he sensing something? Was he about to do something no one expected? In that silent, tense moment, the faint beeping of the machine seemed to fade into the background, drowned out by the sound of Buddy's deep, steady breathing. The stillness in the room was almost unbearable. Then, without warning, Buddy let out a sharp bark, a loud, desperate sound that broke the silence like thunder. Sarah flinched, startled by the sudden outburst. "Quiet, Buddy," she whispered urgently, but Buddy wouldn't stop. His bark grew louder, more frantic, as if calling out to John, urging him to wake up. He pawed at the bed, trying to touch John's hand, his nose pressed against his face, as if he were trying to reach the man who had always been his protector, his best friend. The doctors, who had been standing nearby, exchanged nervous glances. The time had come, they thought. There was no hope left. It was time to prepare Sarah for the inevitable. But then something changed. Just as one of the nurses moved to step forward and suggest that Buddy be taken out, the heart monitor gave a sudden jolt. A spike in the line that had been so steady for so long. The signal that had been weak, fluctuating, suddenly became distinct, steady beats. The doctors froze, eyes widening in disbelief. Could it be? Could this be happening? They rushed to the bed, checking the readings in a panic. Blood pressure was rising. The heart rate was increasing. One of the doctors muttered, "It's impossible." But there was a doubt in his voice. Sarah's hands trembled as she clutched John's hand. "Tom, can you hear me?" she whispered, her voice barely a breath, filled with hope and fear all at once. But there was no response, just the frantic beeping of the machine. And yet, there was something else in the room now, something no one could deny. It wasn't just the machines or the doctors that had brought this change. It was Buddy and the love he carried for his owner that had started something no one expected. Could it really be that Buddy had done the impossible? The seconds that followed felt like hours. Sarah's heart raced as the monitors continued to beep erratically, their steady rhythm now replaced by the sharp, unpredictable spikes that echoed through the quiet room. The doctors crowded around the bed, each of them trying to make sense of the sudden change. The readings were clear. John's heart rate had spiked, his blood pressure was rising. But what did it mean? Could this be a coincidence, or was there something more? Buddy, ever the loyal companion, hadn't moved. His eyes were locked on John, his heavy breathing the only sound in the room, aside from the beeping machines. He sat, unwavering, as if he knew something that no one else did. He hadn't left John's side. The room was filled with tension, the uncertainty hanging thick in the air. Sarah watched in disbelief, not daring to hope, yet unable to ignore the possibility that something extraordinary was happening. Then, just as the doctors began murmuring amongst themselves, as if trying to dismiss the unexpected change as some random fluctuation, it happened. A soft groan escaped from John's lips. The sound was so faint, so weak, that for a moment, Sarah wasn't sure she had heard it. But then his fingers twitched, a subtle movement that sent a surge of hope rushing through her chest. Was he really waking up? Could this be happening? Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she leaned forward, her hands trembling. "John, can you hear me?" she whispered urgently, her voice cracking. There was no immediate response, only the continued beeping of the machines and the sound of Buddy's soft whimper. But then something even more miraculous happened. John inhaled deeply, a full breath, one that filled his chest. His eyelids fluttered, and in the next instant his eyes opened. The first thing John saw was Buddy, his face filled with joy and relief. The dog's tail wagged furiously, as if he couldn't believe it either. And there, in that moment, Sarah knew. This was no accident. This wasn't some random glitch in the machines. Buddy had done something no one thought possible. He had brought John back from the brink. Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she squeezed John's hand, unable to contain the overwhelming emotions that flooded her. "John," she whispered, her voice filled with disbelief and joy, "you're awake." The doctors, who had been watching in stunned silence, slowly backed away, their faces filled with confusion. They couldn't explain it, couldn't understand how it was possible. But one thing was certain: Buddy had done what no doctor, no machine could do. He had brought John back. John's eyes fluttered open, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, he saw Buddy's face, a face filled with pure joy and loyalty. The dog's tail wagged furiously, and the room was filled with the soft sound of Buddy's whimpers, as if he was as amazed as everyone else. John, weak and disoriented, let out a breath, his throat dry as he tried to piece together what was happening. He blinked, his vision still blurry, but the warmth of Buddy's presence, the familiar comfort of the dog's face, was enough to pull him out of the fog of unconsciousness. "Hey, Buddy," John croaked, his voice barely a whisper. Tears instantly welled up in Sarah's eyes as she watched the incredible scene unfold before her. She had prayed for this moment, but never in her wildest dreams did she think it would actually come true. She squeezed John's hand, her heart pounding with joy and disbelief. "John, oh my God, you're awake," she whispered, her voice shaking. Her mind was racing. Could this really be happening? Had Buddy's actions truly brought him back? The doctor stood frozen, still in shock, unable to explain the sudden recovery that no medical expert could have predicted. But for Sarah, there was no doubt. She knew in her heart that Buddy had done something extraordinary. The doctors exchanged glances, their disbelief slowly turning into reluctant awe. One of them stepped forward, his voice low but filled with wonder. "This is impossible," he murmured. "We don't have an explanation." But even as they spoke, the monitors confirmed what they couldn't understand. John's heart was beating strongly, his blood pressure normalizing. He was alive, fully awake and aware. Sarah looked at Buddy, her heart full of gratitude. The dog had come to say goodbye, but instead he had brought John back to life. No one could explain how or why, but the truth was clear. Buddy had been more than just a pet. He had been a lifeline. He had never given up, and in turn, neither had John. In that moment, Sarah knew that what had happened in that sterile hospital room was nothing short of a miracle. John was back, and it was all because of the love and loyalty of one incredible dog. The doctors couldn't explain it, but everyone in that room knew one thing for certain. Buddy hadn't come to say goodbye. He had come to bring John home. Wow, what an incredible story. We want to hear from you. How did this heartwarming tale make you feel? Do you believe that Buddy's loyalty and love brought John back to life? Or do you think it was just a coincidence? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We're dying to know what you think. Have you ever experienced a moment like this with a pet or loved one? Maybe there's a special bond you've shared with an animal that you feel changed your life in ways words can't describe. Don't hold back. Let's get a conversation going. Your stories matter, and we're here to listen. And if you enjoyed this emotional story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. There's so much more to come, and trust me, you won't want to miss the next one. You'll be the first to see our new videos every week, each one filled with more incredible moments just like this. Make sure to leave a like, share this story with your friends, and stay tuned for tomorrow's special episode. Thanks for watching, and we can't wait to read your comments.